Seller paid closing costs can be the difference between can we do this right now and we're doing this. We're going to look at some real life scenarios and show how payments can change when you use money for closing costs versus putting them towards your down payment. Hi everyone, I'm Tabitha or Tabby Klein, the ILM Realtor, helping you find your home here in Wilmington, North Carolina. Today I'm sitting down with Joey Milam from Alpha Mortgage Advantage. Joey is a lifetime Wilmington local, a top producing loan officer here in southeastern North Carolina, and the guy that people call when a loan feels a little complicated. We're going to break down the mortgage process today in plain English. No shame, no dumb questions, so you can move forward with confidence. Welcoming my guest, Joey Milam. Hi, Joey. How are you today?
I'm good, Tabitha. How are you?
I am wonderful. The sun is shining. The tank is clean. That's a Finding Nemo reference, if anybody didn't get that. So today we are going to be talking about loans and getting into your home and some creative ways that we talked about that I didn't even really fully grasp until we talked the other day. So I would love to jump into this with you. But before we do any of that, you're a full-on Wilmington local.
We moved here when I was 6 years old. So for me, this is home. I think I'm accepted as a native at this point.
I think you're accepted.
For
So yeah, I mean,
34 years. Yeah.
local high schools, you stayed at
Yep.
UNCW. Look at you.
Yep. I
You must
did. I love Wilmington. It's an awesome place to live. I have traveled a lot in my life. Fortunately, there's very few places that I've found that I would pick over Wilmington. Just, it's a great area.
That's how I feel too. All right, so I'm going to ask our first big question. When you say seller-based closing costs, what does that actually mean? Break it down for me.
Yeah, so essentially it is seller paid closing costs. Some people call them seller paid concessions or just seller paid. It's basically just money that is negotiated into the sales contract that the seller of the home will pay towards the cost of buying the home, meaning the buyer's closing costs. There are some limits as to what it can go towards, but it's essentially just something that's negotiated in. Quick, easy example, someone's buying a home for $100,000 and the seller says, okay, I'll give you $5,000. Well, the seller's only going to net $95,000. It's just coming out of their net proceeds or profit on the house. And it's a great way to negotiate to either lower how much the buyer has to bring to closing, lower their payment in different ways, a lot of different things we can use it for.
Okay, for somebody who would be writing a contract, these kind of decisions are made before we put anything on paper.
Exactly. Yes. So the new offer to purchase that we're using now in North Carolina, it's got it right there on the bottom of the first page. But yeah, it's something that you really would be discussed in time. Real estate agent will refer a client to a loan officer such as myself. And, when I'm talking with the client, often, I'm going to be discussing, all right, here's how much your down payment might be. If any, there's programs out there that don't require any. But more importantly, even if there's no down payment, there's always closing costs.
Always.
I would say on the very low end, $5,000 to $6,000, which would be really low, up to $20,000, $30,000 if we're talking an oceanfront, mansion. It can really vary. And one of the things that we need to make sure is that the seller actually has enough funds to not only cover their down payment if there is one, but also their closing costs. And sometimes they don't. That's something that myself, the buyer, the agent, we're all going to talk and figure out, okay, here's how much is needed to make this deal happen. And in some instances, we need to say, all right, we've got to negotiate to try and get the seller to pay some money towards those closing costs to make it happen. Sometimes it's just beneficial to do that. Maybe the buyer has the money. It's just we can get them a better deal if the seller's paying, a little bit of money towards their costs.
And that's where that kind of creative financing comes in, where a lot of
Yeah.
people think, well, this is how much money I can put down. I'm going to put all of it here. When in reality, we could juggle some things a little differently and get you a better rate, a better loan payment, all of it.
Exactly. It's kind of hard to sometimes describe this, but oftentimes what will happen is there are kind of one of two instances. One, I've got clients who maybe they need the money. They need the seller paid money, closing costs to make it happen. On the other hand, we sometimes have clients who don't necessarily need it, but we're trying to find a balance of, all right, what's going to get them the best deal? What's maybe going to get them a payment they're comfortable with or a rate they're comfortable with? And that's where maybe verbally everyone's already agreed. The seller, the buyer, both sides have already agreed, hey, the seller's willing to accept $500,000 for the house. That's what we've agreed upon. There's instances when, if the contract's not already written up, I may get involved and give the buyer some options. And we determined, hey, what if you went back and said, actually, you know what? I'll pay you $510,000, but I want you to give me that $10,000 back as a credit towards my costs. It's essentially net the same to the seller, so they're generally going to be fine with it. And we can use that to get a lower interest rate. We buy the interest rate down with discount points. And, a lot of times a buyer's first thought would be, I don't want to pay more for the house. You're not. You're going to be paying a lot less for the house because with a lower rate, we're looking over the long term, 5 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road. A lower interest rate means long term, you're going to be paying a lot less. Your payment's going to be less, and the overall money you spend to buy that house over time will be less.
And it's always really important, I feel like, to show people those numbers because for people who aren't very math forward, that seems completely backwards. Like, no, I refuse to pay
Yeah,
more than blank for a house, but that $10,000 is only going to be a couple more, some scrap change here, where a point, half a point, could be saving you thousands, depending on how you do it.
exactly.
When we talk about seller credits, even if it's that 500,000 versus now I'm going to offer 510, I'm going to get $10,000 in seller credits back, or they add even a little bit more in. What can I use those for?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the standard offer to purchase contract in North Carolina, there are no limits as to what, on that contract, what the money can be used for. Now, on the lending side, there are limits. The contract, not so much. There are exceptions to that, though, when we start talking about maybe a specific builder, if you're buying new construction. Some of those contracts that are different do have limits as to what the money can be used for. So it's something you want to be cognizant of. Also, I will say, too, there are limits as to how much money you can request the seller pay, depending on your loan type, your loan program, the down payment you might be making, the percentage,
Interesting.
and the occupancy. Is it a primary home or an investment property? All of those things play a part. So it's a balancing act. We want to make sure that we're not asking for too much, and can we use it all? Now, to your question, what they can be used for, answer in most cases is pretty much anything that is a closing cost, that is deemed a closing cost. The appraisal, the closing attorney, lender fees, your first year of insurance, escrows, all of those things, and discount points. Discount points meaning that is basically a one-time fee you pay at closing. It's a closing cost, and it buys you a lower interest rate for the life of the loan. So that is where some real savings can take place.
So I'm going to ask two follow-up questions. Number one, say we're still kind of playing with that $500,000 number for buying a house. What would be a typical standard closing cost with title, insurance, escrow on something like that?
$500,000 house, I would say when we're talking average taxes, insurance, whatnot, you're probably looking at 7,000, maybe as much as 8,000, depending on insurance is the big outlier there. But generally speaking, around 7 to
Okay.
8,000.
We won't hold you to it, I promise, just for some rough numbers. And
Sure.
then when we talk about like buying down points, what does that cost generally look like on either side from a buyer or a seller?
That one is a lot harder to answer. That
Okay.
cost is going to change and vary widely depending on loan program, down payment, credit score, the markets. Just any given day, it might be one thing in
Valid.
the morning and something else later on. General rule of thumb is a standard conventional loan, 1 point. A point is equal to, this gets confusing,
Yep.
1%. A point is the cost of buying down the rate. So 1 point is equal to 1% of the loan amount. $100,000 loan, 1 point's $1,000. That does not mean you're getting 1% better in interest rate. That's just the cost. That's the measure of cost of it. 1 point on average is probably going to buy your interest rate down somewhere between a quarter and 3/8% oftentimes. But again, it varies with the market.
It varies. You were saying that there were different limits. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. The four main loan types that are out there in the world is how much you can request for seller pays, conventional, FHA, VA, and USDA, the four big loan types. With conventional, it comes down to first, is down payment amount. So if you're putting anything up to 10%, you can only ask for 3% of the purchase price. If you're
Okay.
asking anywhere between 10 and 25%, you can ask for 6% of the purchase price. Anything more than 25%, you can ask for 9% of the purchase price. I don't know that I've ever had anyone go that high. That'd be a lot of money and probably
I
more
was
than
going
we
to
could
say,
use.
for even a
Yeah.
$100,000 house, that would be $9,000, right?
Ironically, in a situation like that, we could probably use it. We could buy the rate down, things like that. It's when we start talking about $1 million house and we're
That's a
talking
lot of money.
about that's a lot of money. Yeah, 90,000. FHA, USDA loans are both capped at 6% of the purchase price. VA loans are capped at 4%. Now, lastly, I will say those are all based on primary homes, a home you're going to live in. If it is an investment property, 2%. Investment properties are only conventional loans, but it is capped 100% of the time, always at 2%.
I mean, that kind of makes sense. We're trying to give people in their primary residences a little bit of wiggle to get into that home for a comfortable price. But if you've got the extra money to invest, you don't need
Yeah,
as much wiggle.
exactly. I will say with investments, investors that are buying homes, it is actually more and more common because at the same token, while yes, they probably have the money to bring, they're also the ones that are looking for the absolute best deal.
And I feel like you have a special angle at this as well because you're also a licensed realtor. So you've got both of those kind of understandings when you're putting together this pre-approval letter, helping these people come up with which loan is best for them.
Yeah, it is. It's true. I have been a licensed real estate agent for longer than I haven't been in my life now. I was 18 when I got licensed, 22 years ago. I keep it active. Take the continuing ed. I'm a member of the MLS. I like having that info and data, but it does, I think, give me somewhat of a unique perspective in being able to be very up to date with the contracts and real estate law. So I often can advise people maybe based on both sides a little bit.
Yeah. I feel like that just makes a very well-rounded loan officer of you. So kudos on that one. Okay, so we talked about what seller credits can be used for. What can they not be used for?
Yeah, so there's really only three things. Down payment, that is the biggest one. Money for down payment has to come from the buyer. And it can be a gift from a parent or family member. It cannot be a gift from the seller. Cannot use seller credits for that ever.
Well, to know.
As a loan officer, it's important that we keep an eye on these things because there's times when, let's say we negotiate $8,000 in seller credits, closing cost ends up only being 7,500. That's 500 left over. It can't go to lower their cash to close at that point because that would be paying towards their down payment.
In those situations, where does that $500 go?
If we don't use it, it goes back to the seller. There's no way around that. Now, I don't know that I've ever had that happen. Maybe at some point, we will find a way to use it, whether it's throwing on a year of home warranty, buying the rate down a little bit more, prepaying HOA dues. There's any number of ways you can do that. We never want to leave money on the table for our buyer.
That's that creative side. We're creatively
Yeah.
financed.
The only other two things, on occasion, I'll have a client who we need to pay off some of their debt to qualify them. Maybe they need to pay off a credit card to get their debt to income ratios to an approvable level. We cannot use seller funds for that. That's a guideline and a rule. Just can't do it. Lastly, you can't get cash back as a buyer. Buyers can get money back at closing at times, but only up to the amount of money they've put into the deal. So if they did $2,000 in earnest money and due diligence money, they can in theory get 2,000 back, but that money cannot specifically come from seller paid closing costs. So there's, again, it's kind of a juggling balancing act there to make sure we're within guidelines.
I feel like that's why this podcast can be so helpful because there really is so many different ways, different angles, different rules, different regulations for different programs. And as a realtor, I am an overarching, yes, I know what's out there. I understand different ways to do this, but I'm not going to have all that nitty gritty data that you're going to have. That's why you're the loan officer and I'm the realtor.
It really is. I think often people do not realize how much of a balancing act it is. I have one I was working on recently where we ended up negotiating some seller paid closing costs towards the end of the transaction, which is a little bit different. The home
Interesting.
appraised for a significant amount more than the client was paying for it. So this client, it was very important for them to have to bring as little money to closing as possible. So I said, all right, well, let's increase the purchase price by 10,000, get you 10,000 back in seller pay closing costs. That covered all of their closing costs. Plus, we were able to use the remainder of about 3,000 or so to buy their interest rate down. Now, why?
Nice.
That was particularly important because these clients were right on the edge of the debt to income ratio limits. And so if we were just increasing the purchase price, it would have put them over that limit. So I had to increase it enough to where I could also buy the rate down, keep the ratios level. There's really a lot of different things that you kind of got to keep your eye on as a loan officer to make sure we're going to get that client to closing.
Beautiful balancing act.
Nothing is more important than making sure we close the loan first and foremost and close it on time, hopefully, which we do always. Our company is known for closing on time, thankfully.
I've been part of a couple different transactions back in Virginia where the other side really pushed the limit on how we were going to get to the closing table. And it is the most stressful situation with everything else that's going on in the world of moving for them to be like, hey, out of nowhere, we're going to push you back a few days.
Talking to a client yesterday, I mentioned, I said, well, barring any delays, we should absolutely be good. She came back, oh my gosh, is there going to be delays? No, that was just a flippant comment. No, sorry, there's not going to be any delays. I promise.
Where do you see sellers get stuck in this kind of juggle of what to do and what not to do and where to put their money? Is there one place that kind of gets sticky?
At the end of the day, on the seller side, they're concerned about the bottom line. Often somewhat of a perception on the listing side. If a client's asking for seller pay closing costs, they must not have enough money to do this. They need those extra funds. That's not always the case. I have had multi-million-dollar purchase transactions where this buyer asked for seller pays. I can assure you, someone buying a home like that does not probably need the seller concession. It's a way of us maybe getting them into the rate or payment or what have you they're comfortable with. So I think that's where it's really important too, to have every sense of every situation. It's really important for communication between all the parties. It is more and more common, with permission, of course, from my client, the buyer, and their agent. I may reach out to a listing agent and say, hey, one of my clients is putting an offer in on your listing at 123 Main Street. Just wanted to let you know they are very approvable. They've got great credit. They've got good income. We can make this happen very easily. Just so you know, I think when they make their offer, they're probably going to ask for some seller pay closing costs. Just wanted you to know that, they don't necessarily need it. This is really a matter of us working to get them the best deal, the best interest rate, the best situation. Now, that may seem somewhat counterintuitive to say that, but at the same token, at the end of the day, everyone's going to negotiate to a price and number they're happy with. But if that's a concern, if we think that, maybe if there's no other offers and the house has been sitting for a month, probably not as big of a deal. Brand new listing and we think there's 3 other offers, it might make sense to reach out like, hey, they've got the money to do this deal, but maybe they're offering a little bit more than they would have. It's all negotiation back and forth.
I was gonna say, that's some beautiful negotiating. Trying to figure out how do we make these sellers feel the most confident with my offer? Well, hearing from my loan agent, everything is beautiful over here. If you see this, this is not a red flag. That I feel like could make or break a deal.
Yeah, a good thing about being a local and having grown up here, grew up in this industry. There are not a lot of realtors that I don't know, or at least haven't heard of. I've been in this my entire adult life. So certainly if I pick up the phone and call, and not just me, any local loan officer, if we pick up the phone and call a listing agent to give that, warm and fuzzy feeling, did this a lot back in 2020, 21. I had listing agents tell me that was the difference. They were 2 identical offers, basically. My people went with your clients because they're using a local lender. We know it's going to get done. We
Love it.
trust you. It's not random online company no one's ever heard of.
That does feel a little sketchy sometimes as a seller.
Yeah.
It's like, have you heard of this random?
Bob's Bait Tackle and Mortgage Emporium. Just no, I don't think we're going to be getting our loan through them. And if I'm a seller, I don't feel quite comfortable with that.
That's wonderful. I want to keep that soundbite forever. Now, you have a spreadsheet to share with us, correct? So for
Yeah.
everybody who's just listening, this will be on YouTube as well, and you can come and kind of really dig deep and see this. And then I will also be posting some visuals. But if you would love to share that and kind of walk us through, I think this is mission critical.
These are just some kind of some scenarios I came up with just to kind of show the difference in negotiating. Now, this specific one, option 1 here, $500,000 purchase price, 20% down. These are not necessarily real rates. So let's just say it was 6.5%. You've got your APR, you've got your principal and interest mortgage, taxes, insurance. Looking at a payment of about $28.78 a month. Great. Down here, I've got estimated closing costs. Remember, I said about $7,000.
Mm-hmm.
Cash to close is your down payment plus your closing costs. All right. What if we offered $503,000 on this house and asked for $3,000 in seller paid closing costs? It's going to up your down payment by only $600. Not a big deal. Loan amount changes slightly. Right here, we've got your interest rate. We use that money to buy the rate down to 6.25%. All right. Again, shows you the differences here. This specifically, your monthly payment, 5-year savings, we're saving now $50 a month. By simply paying $3,000 more for the house, you're saving $50 a month. That's $3,000 in the first 5 years. That's $18,000 over the life of the loan. These other 2 options are the same, asking for $4,500, asking for $8,000. And I did this in terms of increments of rate, going down 0.25%. On this one, if we go all the way over to getting you down to 5.75%, that's saving you $56,000 over 30 years, $9,000 in the first 5 years. So, yes, you're paying $8,000 more for the house. You're making that up in less than 5 years in savings. You're making way more than that over the life of the loan. So,
So when we're talking about keeping homes for a little bit longer time, 5 years, you're more than breaking even. And anything past that, money in the bank.
exactly. And this is where, often I start having a conversation with the client is, how long do you think you're going to be in this home? A lot of times people will say, I think we'll be in this house 3, 4, 5 years. All right, it's hit or miss. More often than not, I'm not necessarily going to recommend buying down the interest rate unless, payment amount is really important to them or we need that lower payment to qualify. Someone that says, I'm going to be in this house for a while, 5+ years. 5 years is kind of a good rule of thumb that if you're going to recoup your initial investment, shall we say, and getting your rate lower in 5 years, well, anything after that is just icing on the cake. It's extra savings.
Okay.
So, yeah,
And then this is with the buyers putting extra money towards the sale of the house. This isn't even asking for seller paid closing costs and keeping the purchase price the same. So if you were doing $500,000 and asking for, $5,000 in closing costs, $10,000 in closing costs to buy down your rate, then you're really looking at a substantial savings, even over
at
5
that
years.
exactly. At that point, basically the seller is paying for it. And you can see from option one to option four, we're only talking about what, $1,500, $1,600 difference in the amount of money you have to bring to closing, but it's saving you just enormous amounts of money. It's saving you $156 a month. So
$156 a month for people who are listening. That was bringing how much more to the table?
$1,600
About
of the buyer's money.
$1,600, and we're saving the $400 over 5 years, the $6,000 over the life of the loan. Like that is substantial. Awesome.
A lot of
And
money.
so
And,
these kind of spreadsheets, this is what you would send a client as you're going through the process. Let's start somewhere.
exactly. Sometimes I send these out. It's two things. It's either a buyer wanting to know, what if I put more money down? How would that affect my payment? Or it's a buyer and we're saying, what if we buy the interest rate down some? Now, whether that is the seller paying for it, the buyer paying for it, I send these out, probably several of these a week at least to clients. And again, I just say, hey, I'm going to send you a menu of different options. Let me know which one you think you want to go with. Give me a call. We can go over it. Obviously, this is a lot of numbers to throw at someone. I work with a lot of first time home buyers. I'm usually going to get on the phone with them and explain it and go through it. But again, giving them that knowledge, giving them that option, I have found that buyers really like having choices like this.
Yes, I have to agree, especially again, that first time home buyer or somebody, maybe even it's their second time and it's been 8 years. This isn't something that they're looking at every single day. So to have that information nicely put out in front of you, I feel like that is, and I always say it, mission critical. But so many things are mission critical when you're talking about buying a house. We're making a decision and it's going to affect us for years.
Absolutely. Again, working with first time home buyers, when I'm talking to them, my job is to answer questions and to walk you through this process. Certainly, yes, I'm structuring the loan, making sure you're pre-approved and you can do it. But more than anything, especially with those buyers, with first time home buyers, it's a lot. The biggest investment they'll ever make. It's the most money they'll ever spend. I like to say I do enough business and do enough deals. I'm not trying to get one over on anyone. I want people to generally like the house they're buying, but also be comfortable with it. I don't want anyone to be house poor. I don't want people biting off more than they can chew. So really trying to make sure that they understand and realize what they're getting themselves into in terms of buying a house and the ramifications of it and so forth. But most people, it's usually a happy, exciting time. We're buying
Yes.
our first house, what have you. At the same token, I really take it upon myself to try and educate them and make sure they're comfortable with what they're doing.
That is why we are in the roles that we are in. We want to make sure that they are happy, that they are informed, that they are setting themselves up for success so they can really enjoy their next properties. Well, Joy, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of this. This was so incredibly helpful. I'm so thankful for you. If somebody is looking at getting into a home or has questions about this stuff, how can they get in touch with you?
Easiest way is text or call me. My direct number is pretty easy. It's 910-250-8888.
I feel like you did that on purpose.
Maybe. I may have purchased that number, but yeah, it makes things easy. My website's easy too. It's literally joey.mortgage.
Joey Mortgage. Excellent. Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, thanks again. And I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
likewise. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Thank you again to our guest, Joey, for coming on and explaining how mortgages are a little bit more complicated and you have a little bit more flexibility than one might think. If you're thinking about making Wilmington your home or you're already here and just want to make a clear game plan, DM me at the ILM Realtor on Instagram or email me at tabithaklein@seacoastrealty.com. Next week, we're going to be introducing our guest Tyler Beveridge with FinPoint Insurance, and he's really going to break down some of the more nuances of living in a coastal town. From boats to homes, e-bikes and golf carts, we are breaking down what coverage you need and what coverage will protect you long term. Until then, thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you around our perfect little city.